It's about that time to open up the mailbag for week 7. Lots of questions with trade activity, flurries of it around the NFL. Who are the sellers, and what effect does Tom Brady being part owner officially now have on the Raiders' plan? A lot of talking about plans and team building going forward for multiple teams on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love and appreciate all of our everydayers out there and all the new listeners to Peacock and Williamson. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of P&W is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5. All right, let's get into this. Multiple questions about the trade deadline, what could happen, what has happened. I want to start with a team like the Cleveland Browns, and essentially multiple questions in the hopper are, what the heck are the Browns doing? How do you fix this? Paul says, does the Amari trade signal that the Browns are sellers and ready to move on with a post Deshaun Watson rebuild world? We have a question here from, let's see, where did we go with this one? We have a question from, well, now I can't find it. Oh, Michael, what are the Browns doing? Watson aside, they trade for and extend Judy just to get rid of Cooper. One has showed something in this league, and it's not Judy. So let's start there. Sellers, what are we talking about? Let's identify the sellers as a whole too, Matt. And the Browns obviously, I think, are clearly one, and I think they signaled that by trading away Amari Cooper.
No, I think they're absolutely waving the white flag for this year. I would be worried if I'm the coaching staff, although I don't know if they've done anything wrong. I mean, maybe some other teams could pillage some good coaches in the offseason from them. I think you could get more players away from Cleveland. Now, I don't know if you could get Myles Garrett, but I do think, maybe a Conklin or a Benito or somebody like that, one of the offensive linemen that's a little up in age. Maybe you could get Denzel Ward. I don't know. I mean, I would kick the tires on any of their defensive players and O linemen in particular. And what I think happened, and, we talked about the Jets yesterday, of course, is some of these teams get very aggressive in the offseason and push all their chips in. And sometimes you don't win that hand, just because you're all in. There's a cost to pay, and theirs is going to be very, very steep. And it's not just Watson.
I think most teams in the league go into a year like, okay, cool, let's compete. Mm-hmm. And even if their team's not perfect, and then early stuff happens, you're in October, mid-October, you're like, well, that didn't work. Okay, so we've got to do something now. Let's adjust our plan. Things are different now than it's a different world right now than it was 6 weeks ago. And was the plan good from the jump? Clearly, no. And the biggest thing for the Browns is that Deshaun Watson trade, which you and I were both against, is not like, oh, that's weird, that didn't turn out good. And it's actually been even worse because we thought at least he'd be a decent player, and he's been god awful for the Browns too. So we thought it was a bad trade, and it's even worse than that for the Browns. And obviously it's going to cause a lot else to be wrong. Like, is the offensive line that bad?
With been injured a lot, but yeah, right.
Yeah, and so maybe there would be some addition by subtraction if they were to get rid of Deshaun Watson or just bench Deshaun Watson or whatever. And, vibes might change. And maybe the offensive line starts to look a little bit better than it actually is. But at this point, clearly the Browns have signaled they're going to be sellers, and they should be sellers, and they need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what they're going to do as a franchise.
Yeah. Do you want to kind of list who I think are the other sellers? And then I think there's a pile of teams that might be a loss or two away from saying, this isn't our year. Maybe we should, field offers.
Let's do it. Heading into week 7, who are Matt Williamson's sellers at the 2024 trade deadline?
All right. So I'm just looking at the standings. I think the Patriots are an obvious one. They've lost 5 in a row. They're 1-5. I just don't know who wants anything from them. You know what I mean? Like, maybe you'd want Brissett, or maybe there's a defensive player that has, a decent contract that's up in age that you'd want. But all in all, I don't know what you're banging on the Patriots door for.
Can I pause you there for a second?
And please do.
On the Patriots, because we have a question here from Mark. And he actually thinks it should be the other way, that the Pats should be buyers.
I thought about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And he says, how does New England not make a deal like the one for Davante Adams? He thinks that that's the way they should be going, is trying to add pieces and playmakers for their young quarterback right now. He says, how do you evaluate Drake May when he's throwing to Jimmys and Joes? They don't even rate as full Jimmys or Joes. They're just Jims and Joes, he says. They're full names. No Jimothys out there and Josephs. And they'll have a top 5 pick next year. Plus, they'd likely get a 3rd round comp pick back if a player like Davante Adams walks. So he's just looking at put the best talent you can around Drake May, and that could even be buying right now. Number one is Davante Adams wasn't going to New England, so that's true. That's never going to happen. But the other thing is the Patriots don't need Davante Adams; they need the next Davante Adams. So I still think that, in a nutshell, means you're more seller than buyer if you're the Patriots, and you hope that one of the guys that's on the team currently, and Demario Douglas and 2 rookie wide receivers, like they've got some okay guys that you can develop and at least be part of the program going forward, even if you don't have a true number 1 yet in house. But and look, if let's say the Jets are like, okay, but now we'll trade Garrett Wilson. Okay, well, yeah, let's go talk to the Jets about Garrett Wilson. Obviously, that's not going to happen, and they're in the same division. But that type of player, a young player to build around, yes. But the fact that they're going to have a top 5 pick is also the reason. You're going to give up a top 5 pick in the 3rd round to go get somebody? No. So I just don't see the Pats being buyers at all. But I get the sentiment of building around May. It's an off-season project.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I do think there's a couple ways to look at it. And hypothetically, like, I don't know if the Bengals would become a seller, but if they lose up until now, until the trade deadline, I could see the Patriots saying, okay, we'd like to trade for T. Higgins. All right, I mean, that makes some sense. But they also have so much cap space, why not just try to sign them for free in the offseason? I mean, I'm sure the offseason will be sign a couple offensive linemen, sign a legit receiver, rinse and repeat in the draft. So I would not be moving many picks if I'm the Patriots.
Right. Yeah. You're collecting picks. You're not losing picks if you're the Patriots right now.
The Jets and Dolphins aren't sellers, I don't think.
Well, clearly the Jets aren't. They just told us
right.
that. Should they be? I don't know. And what's funny is, let's say Davante Adams like, hey, you know what? I want to wait a week before I go somewhere. And so I'm not going to okay any of these deals. And so it's like, okay, week 8, the Davante Adams trade happens. If the Jets lost this week,
2-5,
and then would that change things? I think it's that close to whether they're buyers or sellers. But clearly the Jets say they're all in. So they're not sellers. The question would be, should they join the Browns and the Patriots on your list as sellers?
But that being said, I mean, if they go to 2-5, I think Reddick's on the block no matter what. I mean, I'm sure you could get Mike Williams off them for nothing, and what if the Dolphins lose 1 or 2 more?
I mean, that's true. This week could end and they've traded more players than they've traded for, like traded away. If it's, Reddick
kind of make up for the cost,
So I guess they are kind of both. And there will be 9 games played by the time the trade deadline happens, right?
That's what I wasn't sure about. Yeah.
After week 9, it's early November. It's after. But are you 2-6, 2-7 at that point? Like that might
2-6.
You might flip Davante Adams this season before the deadline.
Yeah. Right? I mean, what if the Dolphins are 2-6 and there's no hope of Tua coming back? I kind of feel like they're a no, but I don't think it's insane.
It would also obviously take something that happens that is little unexpected potentially for those teams to become sellers.
Yeah. All right. So the North, I think the Browns absolutely are. We know that.
Yeah.
The Bengals would have to really fall on their face. And it would be like for a Higgins or somebody like that. I mean, they'd have to lose a couple in a row, I think.
Yeah, right. Like, okay, well, we're not going to get there with Higgins this year. So that would be like a legit deadline. That's not happening this week. Probably not happening next
Yeah.
week. But legit deadline, November 1st. Like you get done trick or treating. The GM gets done trick or treating with his kids and comes home. He's like, all right,
We're 2-6, and
finalize
Burrow's got a bad hand, and we're gonna dump T. Higgins.
right, like a Burrow injury or something where it's like, okay, well, we're clearly not going to get there this year.
Yeah. The Jags are clearly a seller, and I think you could get just about anything not named Lawrence off them. The Titans should be, but they've invested in so many guys this offseason. Like, are they going to dump Snead or Ridley or someone they just bought on the open market?
Yes, maybe. No,
Maybe. Maybe.
Contractually, probably not, Snead, but I think they would have a conversation. The Titans.
I think you get Hopkins off him for nothing.
Right. Like, yeah, perfect. Like,
yeah.
Hopkins, I feel like is somebody who's not being talked about enough right now.
We talk about him on the Steelers show. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I know you guys. Let's pause right there because I want to talk about the Steelers as well. Because every wide receiver we bring up is like, Steelers could be involved or have been involved. According to reports, the Steelers were close on Ayuk. The Steelers called about Adams. We're in on that. Steelers are in on wide receivers. Have not got a one yet, Matt. So let's talk about that. We've got questions about that. And go through the rest of these sellers. Who are sellers at the NFL trade deadline? Next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Arena Club. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Patrick Mahomes rookie card just isn't in the cards. And even if you love collecting, that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com. Now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Every card that I just talked about, whether it's Ellie, Luka rookies, Pat Mahomes rookies, that was a hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After your pulls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent with a full grade rationale provided and explanation of how your card was scored. So right now you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL at checkout. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL, code LockedOnNFL for 10% off your first purchase. The next segment of Peacock and Williamson, sponsored by Game Time and the new Game Time Picks feature, which I love. And I used Game Time, in fact, today. One of my favorite bands is in town in San Francisco. They added a second night, and I'm going to go see them for a second night because why not? Game Time has, I got a heck of a deal on it at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. See your favorite bands, your favorite artists come through live even easier because Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff, especially for those NFL games, college football games. You want to go see the game in the shoes. 100,000 people potentially there. So you might be filtering through a lot of tickets at Game Time. So Game Time Picks helps filter out the fluff, show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets for your next sporting event, concert, comedy show, whatever it is near you. You can find it all at Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LockedOnNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LockedOnNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, here we go. Matt Williamson's sellers at the 2024 trade deadline. So far, we've got solid sellers in the Browns, Pats, Jags, and Titans.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
others that could be added to the mix.
Things would have to go bad, for the Jets, Dolphins, Bengals.
And I think we will cover those questions as they come up in future weeks here in the next 2 or 3 mailbags as well with those teams.
So if we move the AFC West, maybe Denver, but the things would have to go bad. And they have some pieces maybe you'd want, Garrett Bowles or somebody like that. But definitely the Raiders. I don't know about if Crosby would go because you got to put somebody on the billboards. They have a hard enough time getting butts and seats there too. You have to have some kind of draw. But I bet you could get Minshew or maybe Jacoby Myers or a defensive piece, but they don't have a lot of you after.
So the Raiders, let's pause on that one too, because Max Crosby is interesting to me because the reason it's easy to trade Devontae Adams is because he's like, I would like to be traded. The reason it's easy to trade Hassan Reddick is because he hasn't showed up yet, and his agents are asking to be traded. He's being allowed to go look for a trade for whether it's the Browns or the Raiders, and those are the two big ones. And if I was the Lions or I was a team in need of
edge guy,
difference making edge guy, I'm calling, and I don't care if they hang up the phone or what. I'm calling like, look, you guys are in an awful spot right now. 2 first-round picks could really help you get there eventually. And is this guy going to want to sign with you anyway? Would you rather have 2 first-round picks or a year or 2 more of this dude, right?
And still lose all
your bad team and still not win games.
Right.
So Myles Garrett, Max Crosby are the interesting ones because they're absolutely foundational players, and you never want to give a player like that up, but they're also the reason why you can get multiple first-round picks and potentially help your future rebuild there. And I want to ask you this question because it is now official that Tom Brady is a minority owner for the Las Vegas Raiders, and he sent out a statement on Tuesday. And the interesting part was, he on his tweet that he released this press release and said commitment to excellence, right? And that's kind of what the Raiders have been for a long time, and that's been the catchphrase. They haven't been excellent a lot recently. At the end, he says, at the beginning, he's like, incredibly humbled, excited, unanimously approved as the owner of the Raiders. But at the end, he says, I'm eager to contribute to the organization in any way I can, honoring the Raiders' rich tradition while finding every possible opportunity to improve our offering to fans and, most importantly, win, all caps, win football games. # just win, baby. Tom Brady. So, do you think that Tom Brady has a loud voice and makes a difference on that path for the Raiders starting basically right now? And if you are Tom Brady, do you say, let's dangle Max Crosby or let's build around Max Crosby?
Tough one, because a family has owned this organization since this organization was in existence, basically. The Davis family. But frankly, I don't think they've done it well going back to Al's last 10 years on earth or so. And I don't think his son has done a good job. Now, if I could own 0.0001% of an organization, I would love to, because you can't lose money on it. So if Tom's just looking at it like buying a stock and I'm going to stay not involved, he's going to win. He's going to make more than he puts in 100 out of 100 times. If he's in the walls, though, on a day-to-day basis, I think he's going to lose his mind and be like, I don't understand how this organization works at all. And I would hope they would take his advice and let him have some input, because I bet he would change a lot from what I get.
I still think it's far-fetched that Max Crosby would be traded. And Max Crosby himself has kind of gone the opposite way of Devontae Adams recently. And, who knows, maybe losing, maybe like you're like, oh God, this is tiring. And, after 6 weeks, you're or another year of losing, maybe your attitude changes towards it. But he's like, no, I've got a tattoo of the Raiders on my body. I'm not trying to get out of here. And so if that's how he feels, then I think you got to try to build around him. But again, and depending on the team, and here's the thing: if I'm a team, like we talked about this yesterday, late first round pick, the Lions, sure, have 2 first round picks all day long. I don't care, for Max Crosby, for Myles Garrett, those players are available. But again, multiple first round picks could help your rebuild. But what are the odds you even get a player as good as Max Crosby? So in the end, I think pipe dream. I think on Myles Garrett, on Max Crosby. But I'm still calling.
Oh, I'm still calling. And they wouldn't be the only team. If I was the Bears, I would call. I just want to double check. He's 27 years old. So,
and the Raiders already went through this with Khalil Mack too.
Right. And then they got all those picks and screwed them up so badly.
And then hit with a random 4th round pick on Max Crosby.
Yeah. But they got there. They traded Cooper, Amari, and Mack for a lot of picks and got nothing out of it because they screwed up the picks.
Yeah, you still got to hit on those picks.
Yeah.
How
buzz through the NFC?
This just dawned on me real quick, though, and then we'll get to the NFC. What if you say we'll take Deshaun Watson, but you got to give us Myles Garrett? You're like, okay, Browns,
right?
Wash your hands, Browns. Wash your hands. You get to start at 0.
Yeah,
and if I think the Bears
draft one in the first round or whatever, right?
Yeah, Bears have a ton of cap space, right? Could the Bears like work out a deal where like, okay, you might get fewer picks,
right? Yeah, I mean, or the Patriots or whoever has the most cap space next year just says
you work out a deal to where it's like, okay, we're going to do this. Deshaun Watson would be not a deadline move. Probably it'd have to be an offseason move because then you do, okay, like post June 1st. So then you spread money around more and you eat a little, but then the team that takes them on takes on a lot still, but not the full thing. And then you're able to just kind of spread the money out a little bit more so everyone's okay with it. And then it's like, but we got to take Myles Garrett.
It maybe be something like, we'll give you a 7th rounder for Myles Garrett and Watson.
It would probably still be more to benefit the Browns as far as picks go, but it wouldn't be as much as they would get for Myles Garrett. But it's the only way to get out from under.
Or maybe I trade my worst contract, the contract I want to get out of the most, to the Browns for Garrett and Watson.
And it'd still be a pick going to Cleveland, I think, but I think it could happen.
I don't know. And in that Sando article, he kind of compares it to Osweiler. And the way he broke it down, I think that was his. I've read a couple of these articles, that if Osweiler was a 2 to take on like $15 million, then the equivalent would be like 3 1s to take on 75. You know what I mean?
Right. It's 75, isn't it? You'd be taking on.
Yeah, it's more. I mean, it's like, I think the conclusion was it'd be like 3 1s, 3 2s, and something else is the equivalent of that much cap space.
All right. Like, so maybe you just send the 2 1s instead for Garrett and say,
but that might be the first pick in the draft too. I mean, like the Browns 1 is pretty high.
Wow.
Yeah,
all right.
Take 3 1s and Watson for a 7th. Like that's
let's move along. Next, let's get to the NFC side. Who is selling at the deadline in 2024? The next segment of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. NFL fans, right now you can start huge with FanDuel and get a big return, and that return includes $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, and all you got to do is place your first $5 bet after you sign up at FanDuel.com. And by the way, speaking of FanDuel.com, when you get a hunch in the middle of a football game on Sunday and you're watching your favorite team, you think, I want to go check the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. You can find it all on the very same page where you place your bets at FanDuel.com, and maybe get informed on some future bets you want to make or some in-game bets, prop bets. You can find all the weekly lines, the year-long bets, who's going to win the next Super Bowl, awards bets, and not just NFL, but every sport out there. You can find the action at FanDuel because, after all, they are America's #1 sports book. So go to FanDuel.com and get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Download the app or go to FanDuel.com to get started. We kind of glossed over the Colts before we get to the NFC side of things, and we got a question here from Michael. He said, if you're the Colts, what's more important, playing Flacco and grinding out wins to maybe make the playoffs and losing the first round, or developing Richardson and finding out if he's the future? Even if they don't win another game this year, if the coach has job security, that's an easy one. That says Michael.
Yeah, and I think it's Richardson because he's not Will Levis. It's a 2nd-round pick that you inherited. He's the 5th overall pick or whatever that you drafted, and yeah, you're going to take your lumps, but what if they lose the next? I almost didn't bring them up as a trade candidate. If you lose your next 2, could you dump a Pittman or somebody like that? I tend to think not. I think he just
probably not Pittman, but like maybe an Alec Pierce or something like that. Because
with Donnie Mitchell sitting there,
you got the young guy in AD Mitchell, you got the veteran who you just paid, so you're not going to move him. You have to play Richardson, and to be honest with you, even with Flacco, it's not like you're rolling into the playoffs. You probably not. Outside looking in anyway, so you got to play Richardson. I think that's an easy one for me. But I think you can also be a seller while you do it. Unless you think that you're that one piece away. Maybe you're like, this one thing's not working for us. We're a lot better football team than we've shown here, no matter who the quarterback is. Let's go get that defensive tackle or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It might help you get from 8 seed to 7 seed. I could see that.
If I'm in their shoes, I would look at it, hopefully, like this is what you're going for, is we're one off season away with Richardson's further development the rest of this year from being a contender. If we got one more big piece on defense, we should be able to compete with Houston. And so I'm not trading you Quentin Nelson or Buckner if he was healthy or, anything like that.
I think the one downfall for the Colts and the way Chris Ballard builds that thing is that he's such a slow builder, which is good. And I think in the end, you want to build naturally and build a foundation through the draft. But we're seeing all these really good teams in the NFL. You got to be a little bit more active in free agency and trades.
Yeah.
And he just really hasn't been that guy who went and traded for DeForest Buckner. So, but you got to supplement your draft picks. And that's so I would kind of argue for the Colts to be maybe more buyers than sellers and potentially, in the offseason, maybe more so. I just don't know if this year is going to work out for them. But I could see the Colts going really either way. They're kind of just right in the middle. But as far as the quarterback question, you got to play Richardson if he's healthy.
You have to. All right, let's move to the NFC here and wrap this thing up. I think the Giants are sellers, but not Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas, who unfortunately just got injured, is out for the year. Like if somebody wanted to take Daniel Jones off their hands, that's a different story. Like I brought up Slayton a million times for the Steelers as a cheap move. Like that's the kind of thing I could see them doing, but I don't see, Burns or Thibodeau or certainly not Neighbors or offensive line help. I mean, unless you're dumping Neal for nothing, so they're kind of an odd one.
I would say the Giants are frustrating from a standpoint, and this is nothing new. And we've talked about this, the Raiders and definitely the Broncos, like their builds are so weird that they should probably be sellers, but it's like they probably should have already been like they should have already done the thing. And now you're 3 years into this with a new regime, and it's like, well, now if you're the Giants, you're selling for somebody else to use those draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the Jaguars or, maybe the Raiders, the Broncos, the Giants, I feel like there are these teams that they did weird stuff the last few years that set them back. And so the build is behind, and it's like, okay, well, who are you building it for? And I think there's some teams that should be sellers didn't rip the Band-Aid off soon enough. And so now they've just slow played themselves into a bad football team to where whatever picks they would get if they did sell, it would have to come from ownership because self-preservation. I don't think any of these GMs want to get fired and get picks for somebody else to use.
I tend to agree. It's a weird build, and I think you're kind of just staying the course with your stars. Again, maybe you move a Slayton, but you're only going to get like a 5th or 6th round pick for him.
The Washington Commanders, do they say, we're closer than we thought, so let's buy? Or could they even still be sellers with that?
I know.
That eye on the future and being like, no, we're not quite there yet. But you almost can't sell if you jump out to 4 wins in the first 5 weeks.
Right. Of the season. And you can't sell McLaurin. No
chance.
And I'm not sure who else would come knocking on your door for guys. I don't
they
think
were
you're selling
before the season started. They traded Dotson.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. But that's probably changed. So do they go the other way maybe and become buyers? I wonder.
Kind of like the Patriots, but a much better version where I think I want to keep my picks and build for the future with a young quarterback. But if there was Jalen Waddle or Garrett Wilson available, like sign me up,
Right. Yeah.
I don't think anyone in the North. I think they're all buyers. They're all good. The South, absolutely Carolina. I mean, like Deontay Johnson, I'm sure could go. Or, I think there's plenty of things, whatever you want on defense, basically. What about the Saints? Are they a loss away on Thursday night from being that team? Like, I don't think they'd dump Olave, but Kamara or the Honey Badger or, some of their old dudes that are expensive.
They probably should be.
It's just not how they're wired.
They don't do that, though. Yeah.
Right.
They're kind of another team I would put close to that category of the New York Giants where it's like, what are you doing? Should have already done this, Now after all this, now we're going to sell. I just don't think that's in their DNA. So I would say they probably don't become sellers. But if they lose a game or two here coming up and have this, 5-6 game losing streak after starting off hot, you've got to start considering it.
Yeah, if you go 2-5 after losing to Denver on Thursday night and your quarterback's injured and things are bad, I would strongly consider it with those contracts.
What's
Arizona?
What's the problem? Real quick on Derek Carr. Is he?
I think it's week to week, 2 or 3 more weeks, maybe at most. So I was wondering if you could trade him.
If he was, that's what I was saying. So if he's back, maybe you trade him. If you'd like a little bit of what you're seeing from Rattler,
draft a guy cheap.
Yeah, and if not, then maybe you sell anyway, but just not him, but you sell other pieces because you're building around you're resetting at quarterback. Once you reset,
and maybe even let Rattler stay in the lineup.
Right? Yeah.
So that leaves the West. The Rams are weird. Like, could you get Cooper Kupp off the Rams? Like, he's the only name I can come up with. Like, they're not going to trade Stafford. They're not going to trade any of their young guys, which is pretty much everybody. Cooper Kupp's the only name. Like, could the Steelers send a second-round pick for Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, again, it's not in their DNA, but a Kupp being available makes a lot of sense.
Because I think he's healthy this week coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Arizona's another one. They're too young on offense. They're not going to trade Marvin Harrison. I mean, they could trade, like, Connor, but nobody wants anything on defense.
Absolutely. Connor could be the one. They don't really have pieces that are good enough to trade on defense. Right. So it's kind of Connor or nobody, but definitely they should be considering that.
Last one is, what if Seattle loses another 1 or 2? They've lost 3 in a row. Like, people always link Tyler Lockett with Russell Wilson here with the Steelers. Get out of. They have a lot of contract problems next year. You could, a whole new staff inherited a bunch of dudes. Maybe they'd want to get rid of a couple of them. I don't know, but things would have to go there. I mean, they're 3-3.
Some guys don't fit. It would have to go really south for the next few weeks. I don't see it happening with the Seattle Seahawks. In fact, they just bought, so I think that's telling us what we're doing right now.
I bet you could probably lock it away from them.
He would be an interesting, and this is what's telling. So next draft season, I want us to remember this because we're talking about all these teams and what they're trying to do at the trade deadline, and there's all these wide receivers that are available.
Yeah.
There's no offensive lineman available, even though every team
ever.
When we're sitting there talking about guys to draft in the first round, probably lean toward an offensive tackle if he's there rather than a wide receiver, right?
You never want to be shopping in the I need to pay for an offensive lineman, especially a tackle aisle, in free agency or trade.
So there we go. I think the Browns, Patriots, Jags, Titans, Raiders, Panthers are the for sure sellers right now.
Yeah, more growing list.
Yes. Thanks, everybody, for making this your first listen. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Matt and I back tomorrow. Make the rest of our picks for Week 7 right here, Peacock and Williamson.